What's up guys, welcome to Talking Poodoo, a Star Wars show. Today I'm reviewing Star Wars Resistance Season 1. Set 6 months before the events of Star Wars The Force Awakens, Resistance pilot Kaz is sent to a station on a distant planet to spy on the First Order. So what did I think in a nutshell of this show? Well, it's rough in places. If I had reviewed this a few weeks earlier, before seeing the final few episodes, I would have said it's really bad. This is one of the worst things Star Wars has made in a long time. And then it kind of redeemed itself towards the end. The final few episodes are good for the most part. But yeah, on the whole, overall I have to say it's just okay-ish. I think it started well and it ended well. Everything in the middle, almost garbage, I want to say. And yeah, it hurts me to say that. I don't want to say things like that about any TV show or film or whatever, but this is really bad at times. So the problem is, well, there's a lot of problems, but strictly talking about the story, there are too many episodes here. It felt like they were starting the story, and it felt like they had the end of the story, but then everything in the middle was just kind of left open, basically. So, too many episodes. There are standalone episodes throughout the middle as well, where they just don't really add much. It's just like things are happening, but they're not important, they're not relevant, they're not adding much to the greater universe of things. So you've got to question, why are they there? So yeah, if it was a shorter season, this would have been way better. In fact, if it was just like the first couple of episodes with the last few episodes, maybe 10 episodes total, this probably would have been a good show for the most part. It gets very repetitive because it is basically just standard generic Star Wars sci-fi stories in the middle. It's just a bit boring at times as well, because the characters aren't that interesting. We'll get into that in a little bit. So here's one of the problems I have with this show, is that it so often doesn't feel like Star Wars. So, to me, Star Wars has to be a big, grand, epic adventure. Now yes, you can do the smaller scale stuff within reason, but when you're doing smaller scale stuff and then spreading it out over like 20 plus episodes, that's really tough. Even Star Wars Rebels, they had to go off-world to different planets and do different things here and there to make it more interesting, to make it feel like Star Wars. But here, it's almost entirely set in this one location, in a pretty boring planet. This planet is just a big ocean, it seems, and there's this station just sitting in the middle of it. Now yes, it's all good looking, really colourful and bright, but not that interesting. And even when you start to explore the station, it's like, oh, here's generic bar. Here's generic corridor, here's a bright corridor, here's a darker corridor that's under the water, and it's like, yeah. It doesn't feel all that original, it doesn't feel all that interesting. I have no real affinity or connection with this location at all. And because it's set in this one location, it really makes the galaxy seem really small. So, yeah, we hear a few things about like Hosnian Prime, and we hear about the First Order and the Resistance, but we never see that stuff. We've got no idea where they are in the galaxy, we've got no idea what's going on elsewhere. It just feels like this is really isolated, really small scale, small stakes story. So why do we care? But ultimately the story, it doesn't really connect much to the overall franchise, it doesn't add much to the overall franchise. You're not going to be watching The Force Awakens and saying, oh, right, that's how it connects to Resistance. No, it doesn't work that way. The connection to The Force Awakens, which happens towards the end of the season, does feel a little unnecessary, but it adds a bit more of an emotional depth and layer to particularly the main character, Kaz, because he has a connection to certain events going on there. But yeah, really disappointing in terms of the story. So let's talk about the characters now, and this is where it gets really bad. The characters are just annoying for the most part. Now, I get that this show is aimed at a much younger audience compared to the Clone Wars and Rebels. So, in terms of the story, in terms of the characters, I get this. I'm probably not the target audience here. But Star Wars is always meant to appeal to young audiences and older audiences. I feel like this show is so often forgetting the older audience here. So, the characters are childish. It's really weird. It's odd. It doesn't work well at all. You've got the main character, for example, who's supposed to be a really good Resistance pilot. Why would you select him to be a spy? It makes no sense. And then when he's being a spy, he's a bumbling idiot. He doesn't have a clue what's going on. He's really awkward. His voice sounds like he's a kid, but he looks like a 30-year-old guy. It's weird. There's a huge disconnect between the voice and the performance and the actual character and the story. Yeah, it doesn't make much sense that way on. And it makes it really hard to connect with him when he does seem like a 30-year-old guy, but he's talking like a kid and he's behaving like a toddler. Yeah, bizarre. And he's not the only actor in here doing that, or the only character, sorry, doing that. There are other characters, particularly some of the pilots, who, again, they're all grown adults, but they're going around behaving like children, and it's just bizarre and odd. Again, it's appealing to a younger audience. If you're a child watching this, you're probably going to love it. But if you're an older Star Wars fan like myself, yeah, it's not going to work. So now I need to get on to the worst character, Niku. Now, everyone talks about Jar Jar Binks and the Phantom Menace being one of the worst characters in Star Wars. No, not anymore. Niku is by far the worst character in Star Wars. So, he's just so annoying, so grating. The humour and funny lines that he comes out with just don't work at all. They're like, why would you say that? Yeah, he's honestly the sort of character you'd want to slap in the face to get some sense into them. And I hate saying that, but this character, every time this character's on screen, it ruins the show. Seriously. Get rid of that character, reduce that character's role, do what George Lucas did with Jar Jar Binks and tone him down a bit in the next season, because this character is going to frustrate people, and yeah, I hated this character. The biggest problems with the characters, though, is that most of them are just boring. So underdeveloped, so generic and bland. Again, none of them stand out. Like, even the Star Wars Rebels, the characters, it's like we could identify with them. They were key, well-developed characters. But here, they're just pretty generic pilots, and some storylines regarding them feel a bit rushed. There are one or two which are alright, though, so it's not all bad. But yeah, disappointing characters for the most part. And the big example of this, I couldn't tell you half of the characters' names. I remember Kaz because he's the main character. I remember Niku because he's one of the worst characters. Most of everyone else, I couldn't tell you what their names are. And characters from the films like Poe Dameron and Captain Phasma and General Leia feel really forced in here. Poe Dameron, for example, he keeps popping up here and there, but there's no real reason for it. He's just kind of there. Gwendolyn Christie shows up as Captain Phasma, I think, once in the whole season. They made a big deal about Poe and Captain Phasma being in this, but Captain Phasma's barely even there. In fact, she probably only has one or two lines in the episode she's in. So, yeah, if you're coming into this wanting it to be more connected to The Force Awakens, you're going to be disappointed. Generally, it pops up here and there, but again, it's like, this feels like a really small-scale operation. Why is she getting so involved in it, particularly towards the end of the season? Yeah, it just feels forced, it doesn't feel natural, it doesn't feel necessary. And towards the end of the season, the show wants you to feel something. It wants these big dramatic emotional moments, particularly in like the final 2 episodes. Not going to spoil it just yet, but these moments just fall a bit flat because, again, there's no identification with the characters aren't that interesting. Why would I care what happens to character A if I don't actually know that character, if I don't have any investment in that character? So yeah, everything kind of falls a bit flat, but again, the final few episodes are enjoyable at least. So let's talk a bit more about the production. This is an animated show, and this series has took inspiration from classic Japanese anime. The results are that the sets and the locations look really good, really detailed at times, very bright, a lot of characters in like the background doing things. It feels like Star Wars that way on, in that there's constantly something to look at. The characters don't always look like they're in that world though. It looks almost as if the sets and the locations and environments were done by one artist and then the characters were done by another artist, and they don't always feel like they're in the same thing. So the characters, for example, seem to have long, lanky limbs. Their faces, for some reason, are really bright, making it look like they've constantly got a light shining in their face at times for some bizarre reason. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the way the characters look, but I do like the environments. But talking about their bright faces, this happens everywhere. It's not just the characters, it is certain locations, but everything just seems really bright and colourful. Again, it probably appeals to a younger audience. I'm probably not the target audience here, but it just gives everything a little bit of an odd look and feel about it. It doesn't feel natural. One of the big highlights though has to be the sound and the score. The sound design in this is really good. So particularly in like the first episode when you're first seeing the station and you're seeing the ships fly by, the fact that you can hear like the vroom of ships go by, it sounds really good. So they've done a good job of getting the key Star Wars sounds, making their own sounds and making it sound like the things are moving from one side of the screen to the other and all that lot. And the score is, of course, it's not John Williams, but it's inspired by his music. So the score is good. It's a Star Wars score. You can't go wrong there. So that's my spoiler-free impressions of Star Wars Resistance Season 1. I am going to go into spoilers now. So if you're leaving this show, watch Star Wars Resistance Season 1. Come back, watch the rest of this. I'm Grant Burton. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @Grant Burton, but I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel before you go. Thumbs up, comments and feedback down below. Star Wars Resistance Season 1, I'm not a huge fan. Hopefully it'll pick up in Season 2 because I did like the ending. But it's time for full spoilers now, so you've been warned. Full spoilers. So one of the big reveals towards the end of the season is that the station isn't a station at all, it's a ship. Well, yeah, I predicted that. I'm not just saying that, I really did predict that. Because why else would they be on the station? Why would the station be important other than location? It's pretty generic, it's pretty bland. It had to be some sort of significance, it had to have some sort of importance behind it beyond just where it was. So yeah, it makes sense that it's a ship. It looks like an odd ship, but yeah, a bit predictable and a bit underwhelming the way they revealed it. So one of the big problems I had with this season was Kaz and the fact that he's just an idiot and he's stupid. It doesn't make sense. How can he be a huge hotshot pilot but also be an idiot and also be making huge mistakes here and there? It looks like he can barely walk on his own 2 feet at times, and yet he's able to be a really good pilot. Why would you also then say, oh, you should be a spy, when he's got no affinity for this, he's got no skills in this at all? It's just odd and bizarre. And is he really stupid? Is he a complete idiot? Is he actually just a childish individual who knows nothing? Or is it all a cover for his spy work? Because we don't get much of him before he becomes a spy. Because this all happens in the first episode. But then towards the end of the season, when you get the larger storyline and when people start figuring out who he is, it seems like maybe he's getting a bit more believable, a bit more realistic, a bit more serious. It's hard to tell. So was this all just an act because he's a spy? I hope so, but I don't think so. Because there are instances when he leaves the station and Poe Dameron, who obviously knows he's a spy, he's an idiot around him as well. He doesn't even know how to hold a gun. So yeah, I'm not convinced that it was part of his cover. And it's just really odd characterization, really odd choices made with Kaz and the way he behaves, the way he talks and the way he acts. So one of the big things about this season is the First Order is showing up on this station. That's why he's being sent there to spy on them, to find out what they want. We never really find out what they want, beyond the fact that they just seem to want this location. Yeah, why did they want this station? I'm not particularly sure. Why did they want this location? I'm not particularly sure. It's a bit obscure. So maybe I've missed something. It is boring at times throughout half of the season, so I could have totally just blanked out at one point. So yeah, I'm not quite sure why the First Order found this so important. So yeah, I don't really know what they were up to. So one of the big disappointments in this is that the show never defines what the Resistance is and never defines what the First Order is. It's stated that the Resistance is not a part of the New Republic, so we know that. Now, I have read the expanded universe, I have read the books, particularly Star Wars Bloodline, which does define what these are. But if you haven't read that, you're not going to know what these are. You're probably going to think the First Order is still just what remains of the Empire, which is not the case at all. You're probably going to think the Resistance is just what remains of the Rebellion, which again, not the case at all. So, yeah, I think this was a wasted opportunity. It doesn't really bring in much of the expanded universe stuff. It doesn't explain or add things that would then make you have a better understanding of what's going on or what the films are doing. So yeah, that feels like a really missed opportunity. It should have came out and said, right, this is what the First Order is, this is what the First Order's origins were. Again, we know that from the books, but it would be nice to have just brought some of that stuff in there. But ultimately, this is just another story in the Star Wars universe set in a very isolated location. It really doesn't add anything, and that was just the biggest disappointment for me. I could totally have not seen this show at all, and I don't think I've missed anything at all. Like, yeah, of course it adds these characters, but yeah, I could do without these characters for the most part. Hopefully season 2 will be better. It did get better towards the end. I think it will be interesting, to say the least. But that's my review of Star Wars Resistance Season 1. I am upset that I didn't like it quite so much. Earlier in the review I called it garbage. Yeah, maybe I could have been a bit nicer on there. I am sorry for that. But yeah, I think ultimately the show is just not for me. This is a much more kid-orientated, younger audience targeted Star Wars show, and that's perfectly fine. But at the end of the day, for me, Star Wars has to be aimed at young people and an older audience, and this show completely ignores the older audience for the most part. Really disappointing. So yeah, I wanted to like this a lot more than I did. And again, I liked it when it started, so I thought it was really promising start, and then it just really lost its way as it went on. But that's my review. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.